Dusk settled heavy over the plantation road. The little slave girl walked behind the enslaved man, carrying an empty water bucket back from the cornfields. The day's heat still pressed down even as shadows stretched long across the dirt path. Cicadas buzzed in the trees, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, then went quiet. The man was tall, strong-shouldered, maybe 30 years old. He'd been working the corn harvest since before dawn, and his shirt was soaked through with sweat. He carried a hoe over one shoulder and walked with the steady gait of someone who'd been walking plantation roads his whole life. The girl was maybe 10, small for her age, barefoot, her dress patched and faded. She'd been assigned to carry water to the field hands, a task that kept her moving between the well and the cornfield all day. Every day during harvest season, they walked in silence. The overseer was somewhere behind them. She could hear his horse, hear him talking to another field hand about tomorrow's work assignments. The sound was distant but present, a reminder that someone was always watching, always counting, always making sure no one stopped working or started thinking too much. Then the shot cracked out, sharp, loud, unmistakable. The man jerked forward like he'd been punched. His hoe fell from his shoulder and hit the ground with a dull thud. He took 2 more steps, strange, automatic, like his body didn't know yet what had happened, then collapsed face first into the dirt. The girl dropped her bucket. Water splashed across the road, turning dust to mud. People scattered. Field hands ran toward the trees, toward the cabins, anywhere away from the sound and the danger. The overseer's horse whinnied, spooked, and she heard him cursing, shouting orders that made no sense. But the girl didn't run. She dropped to her knees beside the man and rolled him onto his back. Blood spread across his chest, dark, wet, already soaking through his shirt. The bullet had gone clean through, she realized. Chest wound, exit wound in his back. Blood pooling beneath him, darkening the dust. Terror should have frozen her, should have sent her running like everyone else. Instead, something shifted. Terror became fear's focus. She grabbed the hem of her dress and tore a strip of cloth free, pressed it to his chest, to the wound that was pumping blood with each struggling heartbeat. She looked up, scanning the tree line, memorizing everything. The direction the shot had come from west, from the oak grove near the property line. Who had been near the overseer on his horse, to field hands she didn't know well, a man from the neighboring plantation who'd been talking to the overseer about buying corn. She stored it all. Every detail, every face, every position. The man's eyes were open but unfocused. His mouth moved like he was trying to speak, but only a wet, rattling sound came out. "Stay here," the girl whispered, pressing harder on the wound. "Stay here with me. Don't go yet." Blood darkened the dust as the last footsteps ran away. The cicadas had gone quiet. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. The girl kept pressure on the wound and started counting his heartbeats, feeling them through the cloth, keeping time like she was holding onto his life with nothing but rhythm and will. The child companion, a boy about her age named Samuel, came back first. He'd run toward the cabins, but turned around when he realized the girl hadn't followed. "You crazy," he hissed, crouching beside her. "They shot him. You need to go. Help me," she said. Her voice was steady, calm, like she was asking him to help carry water instead of drag a dying man to safety. "We need to get him to the midwife. He's already dead. Look at all that blood. He's not dead. His heart's still beating. I can feel it. Help me." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Old Josh, we need old Josh." He ran toward the stable, moving fast but keeping low, and returned minutes later with the old stable hand. Old Josh was maybe 60, bent from decades of work, but his hands were still strong and his mind was sharp. He looked at the man, at the blood, at the girl still pressing cloth to the wound. "Lord have mercy," he muttered. "Who shot him?" "Don't know," the girl said, "but we need to move him before they come back to check." Old Josh didn't waste time arguing. He pulled a blanket from his shoulder. He brought it from the stable, already thinking ahead, and they worked together to roll the man onto it. The man groaned. His eyes flickered, showing white, but he didn't wake. They dragged him by the blanket's corners, moving as fast as they dared. The blanket scraped over dirt and stones, and blood left a trail behind them, but there was no helping that now. Dogs started barking. Patrollers would be coming soon. They always came when there was trouble, when shots were fired, when order needed restoring. The girl started humming, soft, low, the same lullaby tempo she'd used before, the rhythm that calmed animals and steadied breathing. The dogs' barking grew louder for a moment, then began to quiet. They were confused by the sound, by the steady pitch that didn't register as threat or prey, just something that settled in their ears and made them listen instead of attack. They passed the fence line that separated the work quarters from the main plantation grounds. Samuel kept watch behind them, making sure no one was following. Old Josh pulled steady, his breathing labored but determined. Panic became a risky, coordinated rescue. 3 people moving through dusk with a dying man and nothing but a blanket and a torn strip of cloth between him and death. Ahead, through the trees, a lantern appeared. One steady glow, held high, the midwife. She'd heard the shot, heard the commotion, and lit the signal that meant her cabin was ready and open. Inside the midwife's cabin, the air was thick with the smell of herbs and smoke. To midwife everyone called her Aunt Bess was a small, strong woman with hands scarred from delivering babies and tending wounds for 40 years. She took one look at the men and pointed to the table. "Clear it, everything off, now." They swept jars and cloths and tools onto the floor and lifted the man onto the table. He was heavy, dead weight, barely breathing. Aunt Bess cut away his shirt with a knife, exposing the wound. Chest entry, just below the collarbone, exit wound in the back, higher up near the shoulder blade. The bullet had missed the heart barely but had torn through lung tissue. She worked quickly, tacked the wounds front and back with cloth soaked in something that smelled bitter and sharp. Pressed hard to stop the bleeding. "Boil water," she ordered. The girl moved to the fire, adding wood, hanging the pot, herbs, mint, pine, willow bark, in the basket. "Bring them." Samuel brought the basket, and Bess pulled out dried leaves and bark, crushing them in her hands, adding them to a smaller pot. "He needs a doctor," old Josh said quietly. "Doctor's 10 miles away. Travel at night means patrol trouble. Questions, papers we don't have." Aunt Bess didn't look up from her work. "We do what we can here." Steam began to rise from the pot as the herbs steeped. The girl watched every movement, every step, repeating Aunt Bess's actions in her mind like scripture. How much pressure? Which herbs? How long to steep? What signs to watch for? Fear turned to fragile hope. Care was possible. Survival was possible. The man wasn't dead yet. Aunt Bess directed the steam toward the man's face, helping him breathe despite the damaged lung. His chest rose and fell shallow, struggling, but present. Steam curled over his face as his breath rattled, and the girl counted each inhale, each exhale, marking time the way she'd marked his heartbeat on the road. "He makes it through tonight," Aunt Bess said. "He's got a chance. But it'll be close." The girl stayed by the man's side while Aunt Bess worked. She watched his breathing, felt his pulse at his wrist, and when his breath started coming to fast panic, irregular, she began to hum. The lullaby, the same tempo she'd used to quiet the dogs, slow, steady, the rhythm of a resting heartbeat. She kept time with her fingers on his wrist, matching her humming to his pulse, then gradually slowing the tempo, guiding his body toward calm instead of panic. His breathing began to even out, the frantic gasping eased into something more regular, more sustainable. Outside, dogs barked again, closer this time. Patrollers making rounds, checking the quarters, looking for whoever had run when the shot was fired. The girl kept humming, kept the tempo steady, and the dogs settled. She could hear them sniffing around the cabin, could hear the patrollers' horses stamping, but the animals didn't scratch at the door or howl alarm. They just circled once and moved on, drawn away by the sound that told them everything was calm, nothing to investigate. Aunt Bess glanced at the girl, eyebrows raised. "You got a gift, child. Dogs don't usually quiet for nothing, it's just sound," the girl said. "Right pitch, right rhythm, gift is gift. However it works, helplessness became agency." The girl couldn't stop the bleeding or stitch the wounds or undo the bullet's path, but she could keep the man's breathing steady, could keep his heart from racing into panic, could hold him here through sound and rhythm and stubborn refusal to let him slip away. The night held its breath with them. Outside, the patrol moved on. Inside, the men's chest rose and fell, and steam curled in the lamplight, and the girl hummed until her throat was raw but didn't stop. Morning came gray and cold. The girl had dozed in the chair beside the man's table, waking every few minutes to check his breathing, to adjust the cloth packs, to hum when his pulse started racing. Aunt Bess had slept on a pallet in the corner, but she was up before dawn, checking the wounds, changing the packing, mixing new herbs. "He's still here," she said quietly. "That's more than I expected." Outside, voices rose. The overseer was making rounds, his voice loud and angry, cutting through the morning quiet. The girl slipped to the cabin window and peered out through a gap in the shutters. The overseer stood near the main house with the owner's agent, a thin, nervous man who handled accounts and paperwork. Two guards flanked them, rifles in hand. Already dead, the overseer was saying. His voice carried clear across the yard, shot dead on the road. Bodies probably in the woods where he dragged himself. We'll find it when the dogs track it down. The owner's agent nodded, writing in a ledger he held. I'll prepare the record. Debt called in. Inventory adjusted. We can account for the loss, make it quick and tidy. There's a beer from the next county coming Friday. We can sell off some of the others to cover what we're losing here. The girl's stomach turned. They thought the man was dead, were already erasing him from the records, calling in debts, preparing to sell people to make up for the loss. Hope was threatened by bureaucracy. Survival now had enemies made of paper and ink. The owner's agent said something about tidying the record, making sure everything looked clean, no questions raised. The girl heard the word papers and knew what that meant: forged documents, false records, making it look like the man had run away or died of natural causes instead of being shot on a plantation road. The ledger snapped shut like a trap, and the overseer and agent walked back toward the main house, still talking about sales and accounts and covering losses. The girl turned back to the cabin. The man was still unconscious, still breathing, still bleeding slowly despite the packing. She had to find proof, had to stop them from erasing him before he even had a chance to wake up and speak his own name. That afternoon, the girl was sent on an errand to the doctor's back room. The overseer wanted tonic, something for his nerves, something to help him sleep. The work of managing a plantation where someone had been shot was taking its toll. The doctor's office was 3 miles away, in the nearest town. The girl walked alone, carrying the written request and a few coins the overseer had given her. The doctor was an older man with a gray beard and hands that shook slightly. He read the request and nodded, moving to his shelves to prepare the tonic. While he worked, he spoke aloud, half to himself, half to instruct whoever was listening. Latin phrases, medical terms, are X, tinct, laudanum, 2 drops per dose. The girl listened, storing the sounds. She couldn't read Latin, but she recognized repeating letter shapes, patterns that appeared across different bottles and papers. The way RX always appeared at the top, the way per meant something about portions or amounts. On the desk sat papers, receipts, orders, prescriptions. One had a wax seal at the bottom. The girl's eyes caught it while the doctor wasn't looking. The wax was dark, almost brown. Not the bright red she'd seen on official courthouse documents. Wrong shade, wrong authority. She filed it away. Another piece of information, another detail that might matter later. The doctor finished preparing the tonic and handed her a small brown bottle wrapped in paper. 2 drops in water before bed, no more. This'll put him under hard if he takes too much. Yes, sir. Bitter tonic sloshed in the jar as she hurried out, and the Latin phrases echoed in her mind. RX, tinct, per dose. Not understanding, but remembering. Confusion became a weapon. She could store what others dismissed as meaningless and use it when the time came. The second night was worse. The man's fever spiked, his body shook, sweat pouring off him, and his breathing went ragged. Aunt Bess worked frantically, applying cool cloths, adjusting the steam, mixing bark tea that would bring the fever down if they could get enough of it into him. The man's eyes opened halfway and focused, delirious. He whispered fragments of words, ... told me ... promise. Safe passage ... ring ... double quotes, names the girl didn't recognize. A place sounded like Milford or Milford, but she wasn't sure. A promise made, something about a ring. She leaned close, trying to catch every word, but most of it was lost in fever and pain. Stay with us, she whispered. She started humming again, the lullaby tempo, slower now, deeper, trying to pull him back from wherever the fever was taking him. The midwife added steam and bark tea, spooning tiny amounts into his mouth, waiting for him to swallow. Despair pressed down heavy. The man was slipping, fading, the fever eating through what little strength he had left. But the girl refused. Stubborn endurance settled into her bones. She would carry him through the dark, would keep humming, keep counting heartbeats, keep pressing cool cloths to his burning skin until morning came or he stopped breathing, whichever happened first. Her song continued even when her voice cracked, even when her throat burned, even when exhaustion made her hands shake. The bark tea went down drop by drop. The fever held. And through it all, the girl's humming never stopped, a thread of sound connecting him to the living world, refusing to let him drift away. Near midnight, the cabin door opened. The owner stood there, the plantation owner himself, not just his agent. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a face that showed too much drink and too little sleep. He looked shaken, uncertain, nothing like the figure of authority who usually rode through the quarters, giving orders. "I heard he might still be alive," the owner said quietly. "At best stood. He is, barely." The owner stepped inside and looked at the man on the table. His face went pale. "I thought ... they told me he was dead. That he'd run after being shot and died in the woods." "They were wrong," the girl said. Her voice was steady, calm. "Or they lie." The owner's eyes flicked to her, startled that a child would speak to him so directly. But he didn't reprimand her, just looked back at the dying man and swallowed hard. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I knew the overseer was ... harsh, knew he cut corners, pushed people too hard. But I didn't think ... double quotes." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. The girl started humming again, the lullaby tempo. Not for the wounded man this time, but for the owner, whose breathing had gone fast and shallow with guilt and fear. The owner's breathing slowed, matching the rhythm. His hands, which had been shaking, steadied slightly. "There's a promise," he muttered, more to himself than to them, "hidden where no one looks. I wrote it years ago, before things got so. Before I stopped paying attention to what mattered. Power showed a crack. Truth might surface if someone knew where to look." The owner's hand trembled over a closed Bible sitting on the shelf, one he brought with him, leather-bound, worn with use. He didn't open it, didn't explain further, just stood there for a long moment, breathing with the girl's humming, then turned and left without another word. The door closed behind him, and Aunt Bess looked at the girl with raised eyebrows. "He knows something," the girl said. "Knowing and telling are different things. Then I'll find it myself." The night deepened, and the man's fever began to break just slightly, just enough to suggest he might survive until morning. The girl kept humming, kept watching, and the Bible on the shelf seemed to glow faint in the lamplight, holding secrets no one had thought to read. Dawn came slow and reluctant. The girl had stayed awake through the whole night, dozing only in brief moments, and the man's breathing was steady enough that she trusted him to keep going without her counting every heartbeat. When Aunt Bess woke and checked the wounds, she nodded with something that might have been satisfaction. "Fever's breaking. Bleeding stopped. He's got a chance now." The man was still unconscious, but his breathing was deeper, more regular. His skin, which had been gray and clammy, showed the faint pink of returning blood flow. Samuel appeared at the cabin door with fresh water and a corn cake he'd stolen from the kitchen. "Overseers doing rounds, everyone's supposed to be in the fields. You need to show your face or he'll come looking." The girl nodded. She touched the man's wrist once more. His pulse was there, steady, then followed Samuel out into the morning. But before she left the cabin, she grabbed the Bible from the shelf. The one the owner had touched last night. The one he'd said held a promise hidden where no one looks. She tucked it under her arm, wrapped in a piece of cloth to hide what it was, and walked with Samuel back toward the quarters. "What are you doing?" Samuel hissed. "That's the owner's Bible. He wants it found. Otherwise, why would he come here last night and tell us where to look?" "He didn't tell you anything." "He did. Just not with words." They reached the quarters before the overseer made his rounds. The girl hid the Bible under her pallet and went to the well to draw water, making herself visible, making herself look busy and innocent. The overseer rode past on his horse, counting heads, making sure everyone was where they were supposed to be. His eyes passed over the girl without stopping, just another child doing chores. When he was gone, she returned to her cabin and opened the Bible. The margins were cramped with writing. Small, faded script pressed into the white space beside verses. Most of it was notes, personal reflections, sermon ideas, things the owner had written years ago when he'd still attended church regularly. But in Exodus, beside the verses about Moses and justice and covenant, she found something different. A clause, written in careful, deliberate script that looked official even though it was crammed into a margin. "Let it be recorded that protection is granted to those who labor under oath and covenant, provided such covenant is witnessed by proper authority bearing the seal of the circuit clerk, bright red wax, official stamp, ring impression clear and true. Any sale, transfer, or harm committed against person's name under this covenant without proper release papers bearing said seal is void and punishable as fraud. This protection extends to, and here followed several names, including the wounded man's. Witnessed by my hand and oath this day, sealed in the presence of the clerk and recorded in the ledger of covenants, the owner's signature followed. And to date 5 years ago, shock became resolve. This wasn't just a personal note. It was a legal protection, a covenant that should have made the wounded man untouchable, unsellable, protected from harm. But only if the proper seal was used, only if the clerk's oath was honored, only if the paperwork was legitimate and the girl had seen the wrong wax, had heard talk of tiding the record and forged papers. Someone was trying to erase the covenant, to bury the protection clause so they could sell the man or worse without consequence. Ink smudged onto her thumb as she traced the writing, and she felt the weight of what she was holding. Proof, hope, danger all mixed together on a page most people would never think to read. She pulled the ribbon from her bracelet, the thin strip of cloth she always wore, and tucked it between the pages to mark the spot. Then she closed the Bible carefully and wrapped it again in cloth. She needed help. Needed someone who understood legal language and seals and how to make proof matter. She needed the preacher. That afternoon, the girl found a reason to go to the church. The overseer had ordered supplies organized for Sunday service, a task usually given to older women, but the girl volunteered and wasn't questioned. The church basement was dim and cool, stacked with trunks and quilts meant for the poor. The preacher was the Reverend Matthew, sorting through donations and making notes in a ledger. He looked up when the girl entered. Come to help, come to talk about something important. He set down his pen and gave her his full attention. The girl had learned that about him he listened when others talked, especially children, especially those who usually weren't heard. She showed him the Bible, explained what she'd found, explained about the wounded man, the shot, the overseer declaring him dead, the owner's midnight visit, and his cryptic words. Reverend Matthews read the margin clause carefully, his face growing more serious with each line. When he finished, he looked at the girl with something like, "Oh, this is extraordinary. If this clause is legitimate and it looks legitimate, then the man can't be sold or harmed without violating a sworn covenant." But the seal, the girl said. The clause says it requires the circuit clerk's seal, bright red wax, ring impression. I've seen papers with the wrong wax, dark red, almost brown. Reverend Matthews nodded slowly. Forged seals, it's more common than people think. Someone with access to wax and a fake stamp can make documents that look official if you don't look closely. The overseer's trying to erase the man. Call his debts, sell him off, make it look legal with forged papers. Then we need real proof. Need to show the difference between the true seal and the false one. He went to a trunk in the corner and pulled out a piece of cloth, a ribbon, thin and frayed, with a wax impression pressed into it. I've been collecting evidence, he said quietly. Every time I see a document with the wrong seal, I make a note. Sometimes I can save a sample. Like this. The forged seal has been used on passes, on debt notices, on transfer papers. Someone's built a whole system of fraud. He handed the ribbon to the girl. The wax impression was clear dark red, slightly blurred, the ring pattern off center. The circuit clerk is an honest man, Reverend Matthews continued. But he's been pressured, threatened. His family's been threatened. He knows about the forgeries, but hasn't spoken publicly because he's afraid. Can we make him speak? We can try. But first we need to get this evidence to him. Show him we have proof. Show him he's not alone. The girl nodded. How do we get there? Clerk's office is in town. Patrols are everywhere. The overseer's already suspicious. The hymn, Reverend Matthews said. You know the coded verses. Some. Sister Sarah taught me. Then I'll teach you more. The hymn maps safe doors and back routes. Tells you which roads have patrols, which houses have sympathetic people, which crossings are watched and which aren't. He began to hum, and the girl listened, matching his pitch, learning new verses. When you reach the crossroads, where the oak tree stands, turn toward the sunrise, count your steps in threes. At the covered bridge, where water runs below. Wait until the bell strikes twice, then move when echoes go. Double quotes. Faith turned tactical. The network wasn't just about comfort or spiritual support, it was about survival. About moving through hostile territory with nothing but memory and music to guide you. Reverend Matthews pressed the ribbon with the forged seal into her palm. Keep this safe. When the time comes when we're in front of witnesses, you show this. You name the difference. You speak clearly so everyone can hear. Lantern light swung as someone moved upstairs in the church, and the beam landed on the seal mark, making the wax gleam dull and wrong. The man who was shot, Reverend Matthews said. Does he know about the covenant? He's been unconscious, fever dreams. But he mentioned a promise, a ring, names I didn't recognize. When he wakes, if he wakes, he might remember more. Might be able to testify about what happened, who was there, who gave the order to shoot. He'll wake, the girl said with certainty she didn't quite feel. I won't let him slip away now. That evening, things escalated. A new patroller captain arrived in the district transferred from the coast, brought in specifically to tighten security after the shooting. His name was Captain Shaw, and he was younger than most patrollers, harder, with a reputation for catching runaways and breaking up gatherings. He rode through the quarters at dusk, his rifle across his saddle, his eyes scanning every face, every cabin, every shadow. Behind him came Dobbs' big ones, trained to track and attack. The chains clinked as they strained against the handlers, eager to run. The overseer met Captain Shaw at the main house. The girl was close enough to overhear their conversation as she carried water from the well. I want passes for any movement, Captain Shaw said. His voice was clipped, authoritative. No one travels between properties without written permission. No gatherings after sunset. Dogs released at full dark. Anyone caught without papers gets detained and questioned. We run a tight operation here, the overseer said defensively. Not tight enough. Someone shot one of your workers and you still haven't found the body. That suggests either incompetence or conspiracy. The man ran after being shot. Probably died in the woods, or someone's hiding him. Which means you have sympathizers, which means I need to tighten the net until we find out who's helping and who's lying. The overseer agreed to everything. More patrols, more checks, more restrictions. The net tightened around everyone. Time was shortening. The girl felt it like pressure building before a storm. A dog chain clinked in the yard like a warning bell, and Captain Shaw's eyes swept across the quarters, marking faces, memorizing who lived where, who looked nervous, who looked too calm. The girl kept her face blank and her movement steady, but inside her heart was racing. They had to move soon, had to get the evidence to the clerk before Captain Shaw found the wounded man or stumbled onto the truth through sheer persistence. The third day began with cautious hope. The man's breathing had steadied through the night, his fever was gone. His wounds, while still serious, showed no signs of infection. The herbs and steam had done their work. Near dawn, his eyes opened, focused, clear for the first time since the bullet had struck. He looked at the girl, who was sitting in her usual chair beside the table, and his mouth worked like he was trying to form words. Water, he managed finally. The girl held a cup to his lips and let him drink slowly. Aunt Bess came over and checked his pulse, his breathing, the wounds. You're alive, Aunt Bess said, sounding almost surprised. Didn't think you'd make it through the first night, let alone 3. Who ... double quotes. The man's voice was rough, barely audible. Who stayed? This child, Aunt Bess said, nodding toward the girl. She wouldn't let you go, kept you breathing when your body wanted to quit. The man's eyes found the girl's again. Thank you. You're not safe yet, the girl said. The overseer thinks you're dead. They're already preparing papers to sell off others to cover your loss. If they find out you're alive ... they'll finish what they started, the man said. Not if we can prove the covenant, not if we can show the forgery. The man closed his eyes, gathering strength. The Latin phrase, the one about steam intervals and positioning. How did you know? The girl blinked, confused. I heard the doctor say it. Stored the sounds. Told Aunt Bess what I remembered. You saved my life with words you don't even understand. Understanding comes later. Survival comes first. Miracle turned real. Hope became undeniable and dangerous. The man was alive, could speak, could testify. But every hour he stayed hidden was another hour the overseer and Captain Shaw tightened their control, another hour closer to discovery. He looked at her with something like wonder and whispered, they thought I was gone. Thought they could erase me like I never existed. Not while I'm here, the girl said. Outside, the work bell rang. Morning was starting. The girl would have to show her face, do her tasks, act normal while carrying the weight of everything she knew. But for now, for this moment, the man was alive, and that was enough. By midday, the overseer made his move. Word had spread quietly, carefully, that the wounded man might still be alive. Someone had talked, or Captain Shaw's men had found the blood trail, Or maybe the overseer had simply gotten suspicious about the girl's frequent trips to Aunt Bess's cabin. The overseer arrived at the main house with the owner's agent, both carrying papers and ledgers. The girl, who'd been sent to sweep the porch, heard them through the open window. "If he's alive, we need to move fast," the overseer said. "Get the death notation filed anyway. Call in the debts. Prepare transfer papers for a quick sale. By the time anyone questions it, the transaction will be complete and he'll be gone." "That's fraud," the owner's agent said nervously. "It's business. We've got buyers lined up for Friday. We can't afford to lose inventory because some bleeding heart is hiding him." "What about the covenant? The owner mentioned something years ago about protections ... double quotes, buried and forgotten. And even if someone finds it, we'll have papers that say otherwise, our seal. Our authority." The girl's hands tightened on the broom handle. They were going to forge the death record, going to use the wrong seal to make it look official, going to sell the man south before anyone could prove he should have been protected. She watched through the window as the owner's agent pulled out a document, fresh, ink still drying, and pressed a seal into wax at the bottom. Dark red wax, Ronche, forged seal. The girl also noticed something else: the letter forms. The way the agent wrote certain words, there was an error, a small one, but visible. The way he formed the letter E was slightly wrong, not matching the standard clerk's hand used on official documents. Relief collapsed into urgency. The man was alive, but paper could still kill. They had hours, maybe a day, before the forged documents were filed and became official. The forged seal cooled on the page, dull and wrong, and the girl knew she had to move tonight, had to get the proof to the clerk before morning brought finality. That night, the girl and old Josh made plans. They would travel by foot to the clerk's office in town, 3 miles. Dangerous in darkness, but necessary. Samuel wanted to come, but the girl shook her head. "We need you here. If anyone asks where we are, say we're at Aunt Bess's cabin." Sick child. Cover story. What if Captain Shaw checks? Then Aunt Bess will confirm it. She's good at making people believe what they need to believe. They left just after midnight, when patrols changed shifts, and there was a brief window of reduced coverage. The girl carried the Bible wrapped in cloth. Old Josh carried a walking stick and a story ready. They were going to fetch medicine from town for a sick child. Had permission from the overseer, a lie, but confident enough to sell. The main road was watched, so they took back lanes. The girl used lantern angle signals she'd learned from Reverend Matthews: tilt left for danger, hold steady for wait, lower 3 times for safe to move. At one point, they heard horses approaching. The girl tilted the lantern left and they ducked into a tobacco field, kneeling between rows while patrollers passed 20 feet away. When the coast was clear, she lowered the lantern 3 times and they moved forward again. A mule from the neighboring farm had gotten loose, or maybe it hadn't gotten loose so much as been deliberately let out by someone sympathetic. It followed the girl's hand like it had been trained, walking beside them quiet and steady. When old Josh couldn't see the path in the darkness, the mule followed the girl's touch, trusting her guidance, fear bent into precision. Guidance through darkness became possible through careful attention to signs, sounds, rhythms that others would miss. The lantern dipped once, then twice, then disappeared behind a hedge as they approached the town limits, and the clerk's office came into view ahead, dark, locked, but their destination nonetheless. They couldn't approach directly. Captain Shaw had men watching the courthouse and clerk's office, suspicious that someone might try to file complaints or seek help. Instead, they took refuge in a shed behind a Quaker neighbor's house. Reverend Matthews had told the girl about this family: sympathetic, quiet, willing to help but careful about drawing attention. The Quaker man, plain dressed, soft-spoken, let them into his shed without questions and brought them water and bread. "Dee needs to reach the clerk?" he asked in his particular way of speaking. "Yes," the girl said, "before morning. We have proof of forgery, proof that could save a man's life." The Quaker nodded. "The clerk is honest but frightened. His family has been threatened. He'll listen to thee, but thee must speak clearly and show him he is support. Can you help us get to him? I can offer a covered wagon at first light. Thee can write hidden under canvas. But understand, letters travel slow, and oral testimony can be denied. Thee must deliver proof in person, in front of witnesses, where it cannot be ignored." A route hymn verse confirmed the next safe crossing. The girl hummed it softly, and the Quaker smiled with recognition. He knew the code, was part of the network. Safety felt near then fragile. They were close to their goal but not there yet. And every hour brought the fraudulent sale closer to completion. Outside, wagon canvas snapped softly in the night wind, and the girl felt time slipping away like water through fingers. At dawn, they prepared to move again. The Quaker loaded his wagon with legitimate goods, vegetables for market, cloth for sale, and created a space beneath the canvas where the girl and old Josh could hide. But as they were about to leave, Captain Shaw's patrol appeared at the main road intersection, stopping all traffic, checking passes. The Quaker approached with his wagon. Captain Shaw's second-in-command demanded papers. "I have my pass," the Quaker said calmly, producing a document. The patroller examined it, then gestured to the wagon. "What's under the canvas?" "Vegetables for market. Cloth for the store. I'll need to check." The girl's heart hammered beneath the canvas. If they were found, everything would end. The proof would be confiscated. They'd be returned to the plantation. The wounded man would be sold or killed. But then Reverend Matthews appeared, walking up the road with his own papers, deliberately drawing attention. "Good morning, Captain," he said loudly. "Lovely day for travel, isn't it?" The distraction worked. The patroller turned toward Reverend Matthews, questioning his business, checking his papers, giving the Quaker time to adjust the canvas and hide the girl and old Josh more effectively. When the patroller finally returned to check the wagon, he lifted the canvas just enough to see vegetables and cloth, not people hidden beneath, and waved them through. But Captain Shaw himself, who'd been watching from horseback, called out, "Hold there." Everyone froze. Captain Shaw rode closer, his eyes sharp. He looked at the girl, visible now because she'd shifted wrong and the canvas had slipped, and recognition flickered across his face. "You," he said. "I've seen you. Plantation girl. What are you doing here?" The girl kept her face calm and spoke clearly. "Delivering medicine, sir, for a sick child." "Medicine?" His tone suggested he didn't believe her. "Yes, sir. And while I'm here, I should mention the courthouse seal is supposed to be bright red. Official stamp. If you see papers with darker wax, almost brown, those aren't legal. They're forged." Captain Shaw's eyes narrowed. "How would you know that?" "Because I've seen both. I carry messages, I notice things, and I know the difference between real authority and fake authority." She reached into her dress and pulled out the ribbon with the forged seal impression. Held it up so he could see. "This is the forged seal. It's being used on tasses, transfers, debt notices. Someone's been making documents that look official but aren't." Captain Shaw took the ribbon, examined it, his face going through several expressions: surprise, suspicion, then something like grudging respect. "Where did you get this?" "From someone who's been collecting proof. Someone who wants the forgery stopped." He could arrest her, could drag her back to the plantation, could confiscate the evidence and bury it, but the girl had spoken calmly, clearly, in front of Reverend Matthews and the Quaker and his second-in-command. "Too many witnesses, to public." "Turn back," Captain Shaw said finally. "Take the girl back to the plantation. This isn't her concern." He ordered his man to escort them back, and the girl's heart sank. Near breakthrough became chase. They'd been so close. As the patroller turned the wagon around, the girl saw Captain Shaw's second-in-command ride ahead fast, carrying news of what the girl had said about forged seals, carrying warning to whoever was responsible. Hooves pounded away down the road with their danger carried ahead, and the girl knew the overseer would be alerted. The wounded man would be in immediate danger. The forged papers would be filed faster. Before anyone could stop them, time had just run out. The wagon rattled back toward the plantation, escorted by Captain Shaw's patroller. The girl sat in the back with old Josh, both silent, both thinking furiously about what to do next. They'd failed to reach the clerk. The overseer would know by now that someone was questioning the seals, carrying proof of forgery. He'd move fast to complete the sale, to get the wounded man off the property before anyone could verify he was alive. But then the sky darkened. Storm clouds rolled in from the west, thick, black, moving fast. Thunder rumbled low, and the first drops of rain hit like thrown stones. The patroller cursed and pulled his coat tighter. "Storm's coming in hard. We need to get back before the roads wash out." But the rain intensified within minutes. Heavy, driving, turning the dirt road to mud. The wagon wheels started to slip and catch, and the horse struggled to pull through the increasingly thick mire. Lightning cracked overhead, and the patroller's horse spooked, rearing back. He fought to control it, cursing louder. "The bridge approach is flooding," old Josh said, pointing ahead. "We won't make it across if the water rises much more. Then we go to the river landing," the patroller decided. "Take the ferry. Only way to get back safely." The storm forced everyone toward the river landing. The wagon, the patroller, and every other traveler caught on this side of the swollen creek. The bridge was indeed flooding, water churning over the approach, making crossing impossible. In the chaos of rain and thunder and people trying to reach shelter, the girl saw opportunity. She remembered the dream vision she'd had nights ago. A road bent, a chose, turn left when everyone else turned right. "This way," she said to old Josh, tugging his sleeve. "That's not the way to the landing. Trust me." They slipped off the wagon while the patroller was distracted by his spooked horse, moved into the trees, followed a path that seemed to lead nowhere but felt right in the girl's bones. The storm raged around them, but the girl's certainty grew stronger. This was the way, this was the path that would work. They emerged at a different part of the river upstream from the main landing, where a smaller, older ferry crossing existed. Few people knew about it, even fewer used it anymore. But there was a ferry. And there was a pole standing upright in the water, the signal that crossing was possible, that the current wasn't too strong, that passage could be made. Tanik flipped to trust, the girl's knowing, that inexplicable certainty that came from dreams and intuition and paying attention to patterns others missed had saved them. Thunder growled as the river smell rose strong, and they hurried toward the old landing, hoping the ferryman would be there, hoping they weren't too late. The ferryman was there, an older man with a weathered face, preparing to close up for the storm. He saw them approaching and shook his head. "Too dangerous, river's running high. Can't cross safely." "We have to," the girl said. "Please. A man's life depends on it. A man's life don't matter if we all drown trying to save him." Reverend Matthews appeared then, having followed them through the storm. His coat was soaked, his hat gone, but his face was determined. "I'll pay double fare," he said. "And I'll help row, but we need to cross now." The ferryman looked at them, a child, an old man, a preacher, all soaked and desperate, and something in his face shifted. "You're running from something," he said. It wasn't a question. "Running toward something," the girl corrected. "Toward truth. Toward justice." The ferryman glanced at the river, then at the pole standing firm in the current. The storm had cleared just enough, a brief window of calmer water, a momentary break in the deluge. "If we go now," he said, "before the weather turns worse." They climbed into the ferry, a flat cotton boat that could carry maybe 6 people and a small amount of cargo. The girl angled a lantern she'd been carrying, the signal Reverend Matthews had taught her. Tilt, hold, lower. The boatman saw the signal and nodded with recognition. He was part of the network too, or at least sympathetic enough to know what the signals meant. He pushed off from the landing, and Reverend Matthews grabbed a second oar. They pulled in rhythm, fighting the current, angling toward the far shore. The river was black and churning, full of debris from upstream branches, torn vegetation, things that could punch a hole in the boat if they hit wrong. But the ferry pole had been accurate. The current was strong but manageable. The crossing was possible. Mercy arrived through a stranger's courage, through the ferryman's willingness to risk his boat and his life for people he barely knew, for a cause he didn't fully understand. Lantern light trembled on black water like a second moon, and the girl watched the far shore grow closer, watched the landing appear through rain and mist. They made it across. The ferryman tied the boat and refused payment. "Get where you're going," he said simply, "and may God go with you." On the far side of the river, they were still miles from town but closer than before. And the storm had scattered the patrols. Captain Shaw's men were dealing with flooding, stranded travelers, spooked horses. No one was checking papers or questioning movements right now. They moved fast, using the storm as cover. The Quaker neighbor met them with his wagon on this side of the river he'd crossed earlier and had been waiting, having guessed they'd try the old ferry landing. "The clerk?" the girl asked. "At home." Frightened, Captain Shaw's second rider reached the overseer, and word is spreading. "They know someone's carrying proof of forgery. Then we go to his home now, before they can stop us." The Quaker drove them through back streets, avoiding main roads where patrols might still be active. They reached the clerk's house, a small cottage on the edge of town, just as dusk was falling. But they couldn't go in the front, too visible, too risky. They went around to the back, where a smokehouse stood separate from the main building. The Quaker had arranged this a temporary hiding place, stocked with peppered rags to confuse any dogs that might track them. Inside the smokehouse loft, they waited, The wounded man had been brought here too, transported by sympathetic hands while everyone was distracted by the storm. He sat upright now, weak but conscious, ready to speak if needed. "They'll search," old Josh said. "Captain Shaw won't stop until he finds us. Then we wait until the right moment," Reverend Matthews said. "Until we can reach the clerk, until we can get him to stand with us publicly." Below, they heard dogs barking, patrollers searching. But the peppered rags worked. The dog sniffed at the base of the smokehouse, sneezed violently, and moved on, confused and irritated. The girl watched through a gap in the boards as the patrol passed. Captain Shaw wasn't with them. He was somewhere else, probably at the courthouse, probably coordinating the search. Weakness became readiness. The wounded man was alive, able to testify, able to stand as proof that the overseer's dead man wasn't dead at all. A dog sniffed one more time, sneezed again, and the handler pulled it away, cursing about pepper and whoever had been clever enough to use it. The storm outside was fading. Soon it would be full dark, and in darkness, they could move one more time. At midnight, they left the smokehouse. The clerk's house was just across the yard, 50 feet, maybe less. The girl went first, moving quiet, keeping low. She reached the back door and knocked soft, deliberate, 3 times, pause, twice more. The signal Reverend Matthews had told her to use. The door opened a crack. The clerk stood there, James Morrison, the same nervous man she'd seen weeks ago at his office. His face was pale, drawn, showing the cost of weeks of pressure and threats. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Someone with proof. Someone who needs your help." She slipped inside, and the others followed. Old Josh, Reverend Matthews, the wounded man supported between them. Morrison stared at the wounded man. "They said you were dead." "They lie," the man said. His voice was rough but clear. "They shot me and left me to die. Then they started forging papers to cover it up." The girl pulled out the Bible and opened it to the margin clause. "This is the covenant, the protection that should have kept him safe." Morrison read it, his hands shaking. "I remember this. I witnessed the oath 5 years ago. But the owner stopped enforcing it, stopped paying attention when debts got tight, and someone started forging your seal," the girl said. She showed him the ribbon with the forged impression. Dark red wax instead of bright red. Ring pattern off center. "Someone's been making fake documents for months." Morrison examined the ribbon, then looked at the Bible margin, then at the wounded man who wasn't supposed to be alive. His face crumbled. "I've known. I've documented it, but they threatened my family. Said if I spoke up, if I testify, they'd burn my house. They'd hurt my children." "Then the threats worked," old Josh said quietly. "And innocent people are suffering while you stay silent." "I'm not innocent," Morrison said bitterly. "I've been complicit. I've let it happen." "Then stop letting it happen," the girl said. "Stand with us, testify, show people the difference between the real seal and the fake one." Morrison was silent for a long moment. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. Safety versus duty, fear versus conscience. Then he reached for his coat. "We do it at dawn. At the courthouse, public reading. I'll call it early. Say there's a property dispute that needs immediate resolution. Get witnesses there. Officials, people who matter." Fear broke into duty. The clerk had made his choice. He set the true seal stamp on the desk, heavy brass, the official ring impression clear and unmistakable. "This is what legitimate authority looks like. And I'm done letting people forge it while I stay quiet." The night deepened toward dawn, and the girl felt something shift. They had the proof. They had the witness. They had the wounded man alive to testify. Now they just had to survive until morning and make sure the truth was spoken where it couldn't be silenced. Dawn came cold and clear, the storm having washed the air clean. The courthouse steps were already filling with people. Word had spread that Clerk Morrison had called an emergency public reading for a property dispute, and townspeople were curious. The overseer was there, looking smug and confident. He'd filed his forged papers the night before, using the chaos of the storm as cover. As far as he knew, the wounded man was either dead or hidden so well he'd never be found. The sale would go through. The loss would be covered. Everything would be tidied. The owner's agent stood beside him, nervous as always, clutching his ledger. Captain Shaw was there too, watching the crowd with sharp eyes, still suspicious that something was wrong but not sure what. Then Morrison appeared at the top of the steps, carrying his wooden box of seals and his personal ledger, the one where he'd been documenting fraud for months. The overseer's confident expression flickered. "What's this about, Morrison?" I filed proper papers last night. Public reading. Morrison said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Property dispute. Requires immediate resolution. He opened his box and pulled out two seals, one bright red, one dark and raw. These are seals, he announced to the crowd. One is official, circuit clerk seal, used on all legal documents filed with this courthouse. He held up the bright red seal. Clean, sharp, the ring impression clear. The other is not. He held up the dark seal, wrong shade. Blurred impression, forged. Someone has been forging documents, using fake seals to make fraud look legal. And I'm here to expose it. The crowd pressed closer, murmuring. The overseer's face went red. That's absurd. The papers I filed last night bear the forged seal. Morrison interrupted. He pulled the papers from his coat and held them up. See for yourself. Dark wax. Wrong impression. Then the girl stepped forward, still holding her unlit lantern from the night before. She walked through the crowd, people parting to let her pass until she stood at the base of the steps. I can prove it, she said. Her voice was small but clear. Every eye turned to her. A slave child with a lantern, speaking at a public reading. She pulled the ribbon from her bracelet, the one with the forged seal impression. This is the same seal, same wrong color, same blurred impression. I've seen it on passes, on transfers, on debt notices. It's been used dozens of times. Morrison took the ribbon and held it next to the overseer's papers. The match was obvious. The seal is forged. Morrison confirmed. Any document bearing this seal is fraudulent and void. The crowd erupted. Voices rose, anger, confusion, demands for explanation. The overseer tried to speak, tried to protest, but Morrison cut him off. There's more, he said. He opened his personal ledger. I've been documenting every discrepancy, every time I saw the forged seal used, every debt that didn't match the official courthouse records, every transfer that looked suspicious. He read entries aloud. The overseer's name appeared again and again. The owner's agent, a few other plantation managers, a pattern of fraud stretching back months. And there's this, Morrison continued. He held up the Bible, open to the margin clause. A covenant, written and witnessed 5 years ago, granting protection to specific individuals, including a man the overseer claimed died 2 nights ago. Reverend Matthews stepped forward then, helping the wounded man climb the courthouse steps. The man was weak, leaning heavily on Matthews's arm, but he was alive, visible, undeniable. The crowd fell silent. The overseer's face went white. They shot me, the wounded man said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Shot me on a plantation road and left me to die. Then they filed papers saying I was dead so they could call in debts and sell others to cover their losses. He was supposed to be protected, the girl added. The covenant says so, but they tried to erase him with forged papers and wrong seals. The magistrate who'd been watching from the side stepped forward. His face was hard, angry at being deceived. Bring the official ledger, he ordered, the courthouse's actual records. We'll compare it to Morrison's documentation. The courthouse ledger was brought. The comparison began. Every entry the overseer had filed was checked against the official record. Discrepancies appear immediately. Doubled debts, transfers that didn't match, seal impressions that were wrong. Anger turned toward justice. The crowd's murmuring grew louder, angrier, directed now at the overseer and the agent who'd been part of the fraud. The overseer tried to leave, tried to push through the crowd, but people blocked his path. Fraud, someone called out. Forgery, another voice added. The magistrate raised his hand for silence. The evidence is clear. The documents filed under the forged seal are void. The covenant stands. Any debts or transfers made under fraudulent authority are cancelled. He looked at the wounded man. You're alive. You're protected under the covenant. And those responsible for shooting you and attempting to erase your existence will face consequences. Morrison worked quickly. He pulled out fresh paper and his official seal, the bright red one, clean and legitimate. I'm certifying the covenant, he said, making it part of the official record. Anyone who wants to challenge this man's protection in the future will have to go through proper legal channels with verified documentation. He wrote the certification, signed it, pressed the seal into wax. The wax pooled, then hardened around the true imprint, bright red, clear, undeniable. The owner who'd been standing at the edge of the crowd stepped forward. He looked older than he had days ago, diminished by shame and exhaustion. The covenant was mine, he said quietly. I wrote it. I meant it. but I stopped enforcing it when money got tight. Stopped paying attention to what my overseer was doing. He looked at the wounded man. I'm sorry for the shooting, for the attempted erasure, for letting greed override what was right. The wounded man nodded slowly. Not forgiveness, exactly, the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep, but acknowledgement. The preacher stepped forward then. Payoff begins here. Debts void due to fraud. Protection orders activated. New household charter needed, one that can't be ignored or buried. The magistrate agreed. The owner will sign a new charter, public, witnessed, stating clearly which protections apply to which people. And Morrison will verify every seal, every signature, every piece of paperwork. The overseer was taken into custody. The owner's agent, too nervous to run, surrendered his ledgers and confessed his part forced, he claimed, though no one was quite buying it. Papers were signed. Witnesses gathered. The clerk's ring seal matched the covenant signature, proof that the original oath was legitimate, that the protection had always been real, just buried and ignored. Tower bowed to paper. Liberation came not through violence or escape, but through verified documentation and public exposure of fraud. Wax pooled and hardened one more time as Morrison sealed the final documents, and the girl watched the bright red impression bloom. Official, correct, impossible to deny. That evening, as the sun set and the day's drama settled into memory, a gathering formed on the porch of the owner's main house. The owner had agreed under pressure from the magistrate and the watching townspeople to speak a new household charter aloud. People assembled, the wounded man, still weak but standing, the girl, old Josh, Aunt Des, Reverend Matthews, Morrison the clerk, even Captain Shaw, who'd watched the entire proceeding with a face that showed he was recalculating who he was and what he stood for. The owner read from a paper Morrison had helped him draft. Let it be known that the following persons are granted freedom under law, released from bondage, granted right to travel and work as they choose. Let it be further known that those who remain in service do so under fair contract, with wages, pay, and protections guarantee. This charter is witnessed, sealed, and binding. He signed it. Morrison verified the seal. Reverend Matthews and the magistrate signed as witnesses. The midwife stepped forward and added her mark, a simple X, but witnessed and counted. Then the owner did something unexpected. He looked at the girl and said, "You saved more than one life these past days. You saved truth from being buried. You saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be. I just paid attention," the girl said. "Just noticed things and spoke up. That's all any of us can do. And you did it when no one else would." The girl led a hymn then. Not the coded one, but a simple song of thanksgiving. Her voice rose clear and steady, and every voice joined the wounded man's rough bass. Aunt Bess's alto, Reverend Matthews's strong tenor. Even the owner sang, even Captain Shaw, who'd spent weeks hunting the very people he was now singing with. One former enemy, one of the patrollers who'd been harshest during the searches, lowered his eyes and joined the hymn, his voice shaking but sincere. Justice turned into restoration, not perfect, not complete, but real. Found family formed from those who'd chosen truth over convenience, who'd risked safety for principle. The last note hung in the air after the sun slipped down, and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The next morning, a covered wagon was loaded. Tapers ribboned and verified, the Bible wrapped carefully. The lantern now famous as the light that wouldn't burn but still shed truth, packed with care. The wounded man would leave, head north with others newly freed, toward communities where the air was safer and the law was clearer. Reverend Matthews would go with them, helping navigate the journey. Old Josh had chosen to stay too old for long travel, he said, but really because someone needed to remember what had happened here, needed to make sure the new charter wasn't forgotten or buried like the old covenant had been. The girl stood beside the wagon as the wounded man climbed aboard. He was still weak, would need weeks more to fully recover, but he was alive. Proof that a bullet didn't get the final word. Proof that paying attention and speaking up matter. "You could come with us," he said to the girl. "Head north, start new." She shook her head. "Work to do here, people to watch over. Next time someone tries to forge papers or bury truth, someone needs to notice. Then you'll notice. I will." The wagon rolled forward, wheels creaking, heading toward safer ground. The girl watched until it disappeared around the bend in the road, then turned back toward the plantation. The old ledger, the one the overseer had kept with its doubled debts and forged seals, sat closed on the courthouse steps where Morrison had left it. Evidence, history, reminder, but closed now, finished, no longer the document that controlled lives and erased people. The girl walked past it without looking back, her unlit lantern swinging at her side, ready for the next time light needed carrying even when flame seemed impossible. The road took them forward while the old ledger stayed behind, closed for good, and the morning sun painted everything gold: the courthouse, the watching town, the girl who'd saved truth by simply refusing to let it stay silent.